A bizarre story is unfolding that connects three seemingly separate threads: the delayed release of Jeffrey Epstein documents, a former congresswoman's public break with Donald Trump, and the Secret Service now reportedly monitoring her activities. Marjorie Taylor Greene is no longer in Congress, but her conflict with the Trump administration has escalated dramatically. According to new reports, the White House has alerted the Secret Service to monitor Greene's movements following accusations that she orchestrated a public embarrassment for the president. The timing of these revelations raises serious questions. Why is this story surfacing now, 3 weeks after the legal deadline passed for releasing millions of Epstein-related documents? And what does Greene's situation reveal about the administration's priorities? Let's start with the legal context that's driving much of this tension.
2026 has started with a lot of controversy for Donald Trump's presidency. He is facing accusations of breaking the law abroad and at home, and a big legal inquiry that has taken up most of our broadcast tonight with that terrible shooting in Minneapolis. Now, I want to turn to lawmakers dialing up pressure on DOJ under Trump for breaking a different law, which is another big story that he might prefer to go away. The DOJ is breaking the Epstein law that Trump signed, the Epstein Transparency Act. They have released a tiny portion of files when they faced the original deadline, which landed in December, exactly 1 month after the humiliating loss that Trump faced when his own party rebuffed him and required him to stop hiding documents and covering up for Epstein for whatever reasons Trump and his policies had done. And now we see lawmakers in both parties saying that it is clear that Trump DOJ is breaking the law, and they're threatening criminal sanctions over that.
Typically, like with contempt, you might refer that to the DOJ, and then the DOJ never prosecutes itself. And then the problem goes away at the end of the Congress because it's contempt because they're not in compliance with the congressional subpoena, which expires at the end of Congress. This law does not expire at the end of Congress, and so they've got a real problem. The contempt that the Congress refers, they could be in jeopardy of that even after this Congress expires.
Massey is speaking in sort of the legal process there, but the bottom line about the real problem he's mentioning is a reference to that soon enough, and mind you, he's a Republican, he's saying they could be out of office and an ensuing administration could actually hold them in contempt and people could get in trouble. Chuck Schumer says Congress wants that list of government officials that's required and asks what they're hiding. There's also the admission from the DOJ that there's 2 million Epstein documents still under review, with 12,000 documents that reach up to over 100,000 pages released. That would actually mean they've only done 1% of the files that they say exist. Lawmakers turning to external pressure. A bipartisan group wants an audit of this process. Democratic senators also trying to put the heat specifically on Trump's chief of staff, seeking more information because she claimed in a recent interview that she's looked over these files that Trump has named but isn't doing anything awful. Trump's DOJ has said this review could take weeks more. This is after they've had 6 weeks, give or take, and claimed they'd done a review and claimed they had 200 lawyers working on this. Any normal law firm dealing with this type of investigation and request would have completed it by now.
That reporting lays out the fundamental problem. The Department of Justice is currently in violation of a law that Trump himself signed, the Epstein Transparency Act. The deadline for releasing these documents passed in December, yet only about 1% of the estimated 2 million pages have been made public. This isn't a minor bureaucratic delay. This is ongoing non-compliance with federal law, and it's happening under an administration that campaigned on transparency and accountability. Members of Congress from both parties are expressing frustration. Republican Thomas Massey pointed out that unlike typical contempt citations, this law doesn't expire when a congressional session ends. That means officials could face legal consequences even after leaving office if they continue to obstruct the release of these documents. Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer has demanded to know what the administration is hiding, particularly regarding any government officials named in the files. The DOJ's explanation that they need more time to review the documents rings hollow when you consider they've had months to prepare and claim to have assigned 200 lawyers to the task. Legal experts note that any competent law firm dealing with a document review of this scale would have completed the work by now. So the question remains, what's actually causing the delay? While the Epstein Files controversy continues, another story has emerged that the White House appears eager to publicize. According to reporting from Axios, Trump administration officials believe Marjorie Taylor Greene may have orchestrated a protest that disrupted the president's visit to an upscale Washington restaurant. The incident occurred back in September when Trump visited Joe's Seafood, a popular establishment near the White House. He went there specifically to demonstrate that D.C. streets were safe following his administration's crime crackdown in the Capitol. During the visit, protesters from the anti-war group Code Pink disrupted the dinner, shouting slogans about Palestine and comparing Trump to historical dictators before being removed by security. What turned this into more than just another protest was the suspicion within the White House that Greene had tipped off the protesters about Trump's plans. According to the reporting, Greene had repeatedly called White House staffers the day of the visit to confirm Trump would be there, then didn't show up herself, behavior that struck some aides as suspicious. The White House reportedly shared these suspicions with the Secret Service, which is now monitoring Greene's activities. Greene has vehemently denied the allegations. Here's what makes this story particularly interesting. It happened in September, but the reporting surfaced just days ago, right after Greene left Congress and right as pressure is mounting over the Epstein files. Let's be clear about the timeline. The legal deadline for releasing the Epstein documents passed 3 weeks ago. The administration is currently in violation of federal law. Congressional pressure is building. And suddenly, a story from 5 months ago about Marjorie Taylor Greene allegedly setting up a restaurant protest becomes major news. This appears to be a strategic attempt to damage Greene's credibility and rally Trump's base against her at a moment when she's been increasingly vocal about demanding the release of the Epstein files. Greene has become one of the more persistent voices calling for full transparency on the Epstein matter. Her departure from Congress hasn't silenced her. If anything, she's amplified her criticism now that she's no longer constrained by caucus politics. The White House characterizing her as someone who would endanger the president serves a dual purpose. It undermines her credibility on other issues, and it sends a message to other potential critics about what happens when you break ranks. But there's a fundamental contradiction in this narrative that deserves attention. The White House wants the public to believe that Marjorie Taylor Greene is a mastermind capable of coordinating sophisticated protest operations, tipping off activist groups with perfect timing, and executing a plan to publicly embarrass the president. Yet when it comes to the Epstein situation, the administration's position is that connections between powerful people and Epstein were random, isolated incidents, chance encounters at parties, coincidental meetings with no larger significance. You can't have it both ways. Either Greene is capable of orchestrating complex operations, in which case we should take seriously the possibility that other powerful figures were also capable of coordinating with Epstein's network, or she's not that sophisticated, in which case the restaurant incident was likely just an unfortunate coincidence. The inconsistency reveals what this is really about: controlling the narrative and silencing critics. Congressional investigations have begun examining whether trafficking activities connected to Epstein occurred at or through Mar-a-Lago. Representative Robert Garcia has specifically mentioned looking into these allegations. The relationship between Trump and Epstein wasn't casual or distant. They moved in the same circles for years. Epstein had access to Mar-a-Lago. There are documented instances of them traveling together. Recently released documents include references to Trump on flights with Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime associate who was convicted of sex trafficking. A U.S. attorney flagged one passenger on those flights as a potential witness in ongoing investigations. These aren't peripheral connections. These are direct associations with individuals at the center of a massive criminal enterprise. The question isn't whether Trump knew Epstein, that's established fact. The question is the extent of his knowledge about Epstein's activities and whether he participated in or facilitated any of those activities. That's what the withheld documents might reveal. That's what's driving the administration's resistance to releasing them. And that's why critics like Greene are facing pressure to stay quiet. Several people in Trump's orbit have documented connections to Epstein beyond Trump himself. Alan Dershowitz, who defended Trump during impeachment, previously represented Epstein. Alexander Acosta, who served in Trump's cabinet, gave Epstein an unusually lenient plea deal when he was a federal prosecutor. Robert Kennedy Jr., now in Trump's administration, has acknowledged knowing Epstein. These aren't random coincidences. This represents a network of people with shared connections to Epstein who now hold positions of power or influence within the administration. When you combine that with the ongoing refusal to release documents as required by law, a picture emerges of an administration working to protect itself and its allies from potential exposure. The DOJ has the resources and the time to complete this document review. The delay isn't about logistics, it's about controlling what the public learns and when they learn it. The Epstein Transparency Act creates genuine legal jeopardy for officials who refuse to comply. Unlike contempt citations that expire at the end of a congressional session, this law remains in effect indefinitely. That means Attorney General Pam Bondi and others involved in the decision to withhold documents could potentially face legal consequences even after leaving office. A future administration could pursue charges for obstruction or contempt related to this ongoing violation. Members of Congress have discussed requesting audits of the document review process to determine whether the claimed workload justifies the delay. They're also seeking information from Trump's chief of staff, who claimed to have reviewed the files and stated Trump wasn't implicated in anything serious, a claim that contradicts already public information from the released 1% of documents. The bipartisan nature of the pressure is significant. This isn't just Democrats attacking a Republican administration. Republicans like Thomas Massie are also demanding compliance with the law and warning about future legal exposure. Regarding the restaurant protest itself, it's worth noting that Trump faces protests virtually everywhere he goes in Washington, D.C. The city voted overwhelmingly against him. Public opposition to his policies, particularly regarding international conflicts, is widespread in the capital. The idea that this particular protest required inside coordination from a former ally strains credibility. Code Pink is an established activist organization that monitors the movements of political figures. They don't need tips from former congresswomen to know when the president is dining at a well-known restaurant, but the White House presenting this as a betrayal serves a purpose beyond just explaining one embarrassing incident. It establishes a narrative that criticism from former allies is based on personal grudges rather than legitimate policy disagreements. When Greene talks about the Epstein files, the White House can point to this restaurant story and suggest she's just trying to hurt Trump because she's angry about something else. It's a classic deflection tactic. The Secret Service monitoring Greene is concerning regardless of whether the restaurant allegations have merit. Using federal law enforcement resources to track a political critic raises obvious questions about the appropriate use of those resources. The Secret Service's job is to protect the president, not to investigate his political opponents. If there was a genuine security threat, that would justify their involvement. But monitoring someone based on suspicions about a protest from 5 months ago seems like mission creep at best. Meanwhile, the clock keeps ticking on the Epstein files. Every day that passes without full release is another day of non-compliance with federal law. The administration can't delay indefinitely. Eventually, they'll have to either release the documents or face more serious legal consequences. Congressional committees are preparing subpoenas and considering formal contempt proceedings. They're also exploring whether they can directly access the files through other legal mechanisms. If the DOJ continues refusing to comply, the tension between Greene and the White House will likely escalate. She's no longer constrained by party loyalty or congressional procedures. She can say what she wants, and the administration's attempts to discredit her may only amplify her message. This situation raises fundamental questions about transparency and accountability. When an administration refuses to comply with a law mandating document release, what recourse does the public have? When federal law enforcement is used to monitor political critics, what safeguards exist to prevent abuse? These aren't theoretical concerns. They're happening right now in real time. The Epstein files matter because they potentially document crimes involving powerful people. The public has a right to know what those documents contain, particularly regarding anyone currently holding office. The Greene situation matters because it demonstrates how the administration responds to criticism, not with transparency or good faith engagement, but with character attacks and surveillance. Neither of these issues is partisan. Demanding compliance with the law and objecting to surveillance of political critics should be bipartisan concerns. Whether Marjorie Taylor Greene actually tipped off protesters about Trump's restaurant visit is almost beside the point. What matters more is why this story is surfacing now, who benefits from it being public, and what it reveals about the administration's priorities. The Epstein files remain mostly unreleased despite a legal requirement. Congressional pressure is mounting. And instead of addressing that core issue, the White House is focusing on discrediting a former ally who's demanding transparency. That tells you what they're really worried about. It's not restaurant protests. It's what those documents might reveal if the full truth ever comes out. The law is clear. The deadline has passed. The obstruction continues. And critics are being monitored by federal law enforcement. This is where we are. Pay attention to what's actually happening, not just the stories designed to distract you from it.